and that's going to be present. Oh, excellent. So I'm going to start right now. Welcome to the virtual Agile meetup. As you know, we are recording this session, and tonight you can see the screen. We are not going to be presenting on Agile remotely because we've had a bit of a hiccup there. So that's okay. We've got another fantastic topic. Thank you for your votes on that, which are how visuals can supercharge our work. And that will be presented by my wonderful co-host, Miss Ines Garcia. So before we move on to that, as always, thank you for your time. Time is very precious in all elements of our life. So the fact that you're here to spend it with us, we really, really do appreciate that. And with that note, we are here for 1 hour and a half, maybe not that long, maybe shorter, but depending on our discussions and how we go. So it's about an hour and a half. Like I said before, we are recording this session. If you're not happy to be seen facially recorded, then please switch your cameras off. But if you'd love to be seen recorded, then switch them on. We love to see faces. We love to see your enjoyment, hopefully. Please raise your hand, come off mute, put yourself in the chat. If you have questions, we are super relaxed. Hopefully you know that if you've been here before. Ask questions, challenge. Ines loves a challenge, so feel free to do that. So yeah, so please use those tools. What else have we got here? I think that's pretty much it. This is actually our last of the summer wine meetups tonight. So we will be meeting again, I think, in September, October. I just need to work that out yet. But the last talk over the summer break, so we have a little bit of a break. And speaking of visuals, speaking of visuals, as you may know, you may have played before at this meetup, or you've worked with me before or have any interaction, you probably know that I love the game rock, paper, scissors. Why? Everybody asks. Because it's so simple, it's international, everybody knows, and you get to move a little bit. We don't move enough, I think, in my day-to-day, often a city like this, which usually leads to me falling downstairs due to the stress. So let's give it a go. Is there anybody who doesn't know rock, paper, scissors? Totally fine if you don't. I can explain it. It's relatively easy. I'm going to take that deathly silence and lack of cooperation as we all know. Good. So if you guys can show me, or even put it in the chat, your rock as a practice round. Lovely. Brian, Mike, Julia, beautiful, really lovely. Okay, and what about a paper? Cool. Ines, can you show us a paper? Nice photo one. Cool, great. And now the last one, scissors. Remember, if you've had a bad day, be wary of your scissors, what they look like. Oh, Mike, love it. Very nice. The first one of those, I think, which is quite nice. Yeah, excellent. Cool. So, sorry?
Star Trek inspired.
Oh, yes. Very good.
Live long and prosper.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. So we're going to play a little game, and this is we actually could have done this with the poll in us rather than doing a poll. This is why I use rock, paper, scissors, but hey ho, let's go for it. So firstly, show me a rock, paper, or a scissor if you have seen the sun this week. Practice round. Excellent. That's good. I'm hoping that everybody who is not, we can't see them, you've also seen the sun, and it doesn't mean that you're just in this small box cave of desperation. Yes. Okay, cool, great. And the next one then, let's think about if who uses visuals in their day-to-day work. Okay, cool. And lastly, are you excited to be here tonight, regardless of all the issues that we've had? Yay! Okay, cool. Right, enough of that. I hope that your hands are nicely warmed up, because who knows, we might need them tonight, we might not. Hopefully we will always need our hands. And with that, I will introduce Ines Garcia. Are you ready?
Bring it on. Improvising
Okay.
is part of what we do.
Awesome, over to you then.
Okay, let's do this. All right. So thank you for bearing with me into this improv session about visuals. Well, I am Ines Garcia. I'm your co-host for these inventions, and I'm also an Agile coach and a Salesforce MVP, and I get involved with trillion things because you live only once. For the ones that may not know, I actually studied art for 2 years before uni, and 90% of the things that we process through our brain are visuals. And it kind of makes sense if you think in the way that we have evolved as a species. As humans, we have been communicating for more than 30,000 years, and the written world has been with us not even for thousands of those. So from the evolutionary perspective sort of things, we are better at dealing with visuals than we are with text. And, you know, from prehistoric cave paintings to something that you may see often, you know, maps that helps us to understand the surroundings without being in them, as well to diagrams and charts, you know, that all those things have been part of our human storytelling. Here we see a data model, and we see these things in the work that we do often in terms of architecturing and, you know, layers diagram and stuff like that. So our brains are wired for visuals, and this is because, well, seeing comes before words. The kids looks and recognize stuff before we speak. And if you are not making the most out of visuals, then you may want to start. Because how if I tell you that you're not even using half of your brain if you are not infusing things with visuals? Because over half of the brain is using to process this sort of things. And unless our words, concepts, ideas are hooked into an image, well, that information kind of comes through one ear, sails through the brain, and then escapes through the other ear. And images are instantaneous without the weight that language will require. There is the saying of a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that's kind of for a reason. So I give you some numbers. This is not only opinions. In a study, they looked at 2/3 of the employees understanding much more better the information when it's presented with visuals. In comparison, the reality check is that almost half of the companies part of that survey, they rely on plain text. Just think about how do we communicate with each other, even that, you know, we may be in close proximity, we still send each other emails and messages. So a lot of heavy plain text. And you may have seen, and this is more from another study, 20% of the text information is remembered compared to 50% of information in comparison. And this is more from like my Salesforce arena sort of thing. We are presented with this really heavy text slide very, very often, right? And the interesting thing is the behavioral response to this. They're normally giggles and normally, okay, you know what this is about, let's move on to the next one. So think about the things that you are presented often to your teams between departments, how heavy is on text space, right? essentially, our brain compiles things in different ways, where words normally are set into short-term memories. Think about remembering phone sort of verification code that you need to put it in your laptop, or, you know, short-term memory is very useful, like where you park and stuff like that, right? Because our brain can only hold 7 bits of information at once, and having short-term memory helps you to avoid over information. So have you been in a situation like this, where you're finishing up a meeting, you've been having lots of discussions, lots of words, and somebody's trying to wrap up, and to be able to do so kind of tries to bring everybody into a closure by asking, does anybody have clarity? Do we know what we're doing? Are we clear what's next? And although it's a volume question, you end up having this, yeah, sure, yeah, let's do it, right? The reality is that we all go and divert in our own take of what we think just happened, on what that clarity and what the next steps should be. And I kind of covered this a little bit more into the Salesforce Agile book. Right? So really infuse with visuals. Because visuals is how we process information, is how we store and we record that information. And when we combine visuals and words, well, then we augment the understanding and we increase the bandwidth, sort of thing, to synthesize information. So we can clarify when we see things, you know, it brings the ability for us to order things, to comprehend, to find associations in between them, in the way that you digest them, how we store them, and finding patterns. And for me, one of the great enablers of using visuals is it superpowers the ability to co-create. When we come together for a reason and we infuse on a visual, we can all chip in a way that you can just by words. And in the work that we do, we hear all these things, right? The teams may be working on like strategies, flow of materials even, and information in between systems, how we modeling, how we design our workflows, the experiences that we take, right? And all of those things can in fact be infused by visuals. When you're infusing by visuals, some words of caution, please be careful, don't make things overcomplicated. It's very easy to make things complex. Here the art is make things clear and simple. So less is more. Also, when you are creating visuals in conversations, they become artifacts, things that you can refer back to. So make them easy to maintain for yourself. And when you're having those artifacts, make sure that you don't create organizations and data silos, right? Remember about transparency. Tech debt, if we were working in that environment, but in a way that we move away from quick fixes because they always come and bite us back. So what to draw? Imagine someone never drew before, that's okay. Even that you are not a self-acclaimed artist, which I'm really not, you can do this. It can be very, very simple. So what you draw doesn't have to be pretty, because pretty first is very subjective. So aim for simplicity and clarity. So I'm going to show you some shapes that's going to help you what to draw. So simple things, whose. When you're hearing in a conversation a lot of stuff, start plotting the whos, the different entities that are part of. Then infuse with map out the connections, what's happening in between the whos and in between those entities. So you can see how all those elements relate to each other. Another thing that you can draw is the how many, and having volumes are very interesting in a way that you can see them, because it's helping you to understand scalability and impact and influx of a certain point of time, which leads me to the when. And yes, we are agilists. Timelines are important. Why? Because time is perishable. So it's a variable that matters. So when we do that, being able to plot information on a timeline, it helps us to understand voids. It helps us to see how many things are happening at once. It gives us a flavor of that variable in a much more tangible way, where we can make decisions, right? So we are surfacing things to make better decisions. And some more things when you are plotting out a process, maybe where it starts and where it ends. It's easy, a little circle. When we were talking about elements, you're going to have actors, you're going to have stock of stuff moving around. So that is a simple square. Arrows are for the in-out flow of the elements and information. And decision elements, just a diamond, are super powerful, even when, because we tend to think in a very happy path, when this happened, then this happens, even on agreements of teams, right? So we are trying to map a certain process to articulate based on how we behave with a different team. On those decision elements, you will tend to have the happy path, but it's great to have the pause moment to think, okay, we do have a void over here when this logic does not meet criteria. Where is the fallback plan? And then loops. In terms of loops, could be reinforcing loops or balancing loops. Probably we could do a session one day about system thinking and how loops matter. And then the last thing over here, which is just like a simple frame, is how you encompass boundaries, right? So when we are looking at a lot of things at once, group things into boundaries that will help us to digest things a little bit. So these are just basics, right? So as soon as you get used to drawing, the easier you're gonna find it and to implement in your work. So when I was thinking, okay, how do I use visuals? And I started looking at things I use often. Kind of three themes emerge. One is about how I use visuals to make decisions. For example, it's giving us to make decisions so we can determine impact, so we can understand context, and we can find constraints. The 5 O's that I came up with. Right? So having visuals for decisions, it's gonna give us the ability to see options, to find observations, to surface outliers, where things overlap, and ultimately for outcomes. And for the ones that know, you know, that game that I invented, it literally does that. It gives the ability that at once, one suppress common wisdom, and at once the impactful instantaneously of images, we can say what we think as a team, so that we can make decisions, informed decisions of what we want to do. One example of visuals to make decisions would be a matrix, right? So if you're planning to either change a process, or maybe you want to enhance your applications with who knows what, right? Help your teams to make decisions better. I use this a lot, where I plot down the variables. Okay, hold on, let's not talk about solutions yet. What are the things that we care about? That could be in terms of, if we're talking about external applications, limits of the applications, how it behaves with certain items are actually important for us. Let's say pricing is also a good one. Plot all your variables first, and then go to the marketplace, right? Because it's very easy to jump into solutionizing, very easy to get distracted with flashing new wonderful things. Do that after you have your variables. Once you know what you want, then go out there and start plotting some colors. And it gives you the ability to surface and say as a team, okay, how important is variable 6 for us, right? One way, this is perhaps too self-Forthian, but it's an example of internationalization, where you are looking at Demandware, which is an engine to help you to have an e-commerce. Anyway, so you have multiple different ways, and it's really, if you look at the matrix to make the decision, it's quite text heavy. So if it was for me, I will plot the variables. This is a table split in two, and then I will color code, right? Are we gonna have option 1, 2, or 3? That will mean how much I can customize, how it behaves with multiple currencies, multiple markets, blah, blah, blah. This is an example where we were using an application. It was coming renewal time, and having a visual representation to discuss renewal, it was really useful. How much we use it, what works well, what doesn't, what we're going to do. It helps us to inform our conversations. I know everything has to be matrices. That just seems to happen a lot. Here you have an example of a team started to work at the end of last year. Is a startup, wonderful place where we have zero, very rare scenario, zero legacy technology. This doesn't happen often. Blank canvas is super exciting, especially because every single conversation that we'll have as a team, we will come up with extensions and byproducts, and everything could be wonderful. And so, you know, this startup, it becomes huge, a potential never-ending story, which is very good for business. Now, how can we prove ourselves wrong? Instead of going into multiple diversions of multiple quantum physics realities, what can we do today? What can we start building today so we can prove us wrong? So we can throw it in the market and make a decision if we're gonna pivot or we're gonna persevere. Those poking questions landed us in something like this, where you have 3 different options. So option 1 is you have one engine where multiple different entities talks to. Option 2 is multiple packages of different applications. Each entity has one. Option 3, we only building an orchestrator that helps us to do the calls to the networks. And we kind of went for option 3 because it was the bare bones of what the thing is gonna need to do. Regardless, the other 2 we could plug in on top. Having a visual, having those discussions, okay, how about this? What this entity will do, da, 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 da. It gave us the opportunity to make a list of challenges and benefits of each one of the options, and ultimately make a decision. Okay, so that was theme 1, decisions. Theme 2 is about information's radiators. So the ability to use visuals. It gives us the power to see in macro. In macro in a way that we can digest very quickly. So here, a lot of different ways that you can use, for example, what I call Scrooge. So plot 3 columns and the visual of what is in the past, what it is right now, or you're building towards. And again, that can also be a process. And then the future vision, right? So past, present, future. You can also use mind maps, spider maps, swim lanes, mappings. There's tons of different things that's going to help you to have information radiators. Now here on the right, we have a little flavor of what as agilists we use of value stream mapping, right? The ability to see the value stream from the beginning to the very end, and hopefully in a circular way, right? Now, as our practice, I challenge that we need to bring up a notch what we do. We often, when we look at value stream mapping, we only look at one variable to optimize, and that's time. How if we take this as an opportunity to infuse our conversations to bring more variables to the table, such as how can we reduce waste of, yes, time, but waste of materials and energy and transport. Okay, more examples of information radiators. So we have the ability to find patterns. So this is an example of a team I was working, and then week 12, we paused, we did a snapshot of the multiple different burn downs, and we look at it as a team. Okay, what does this tell us? Why does this happen? How do we want it to look like? which patterns can we find? Why is that? Another example, which is this is about epics. Epics is a way where you group the multiple different things that you do in themes. And we were looking with this theme about where do we put our mind and heart and effort and time, right? And it gives us the ability to see that we spend a lot on the dangerous BAU. And what is BAU? Or miscellaneous or other, right? We could dig deeper and find out what were the themes of BAU and what does that tell us and where our heart and mind and effort should be. So we can make conscious decisions when we digest it at a glance, our reality. And theme number 3, which is about using visuals to surface logic and systems. That's the power of the instantaneous processing we were talking about. And I made up this visual, right? So using visuals here is going to help you to find voids, create ideas, surface ideas. It's going to tell you a story. It's universal, right? You should be doing it in a way that anybody can digest. Make it actual. So when you are plotting, especially a process, it's very easy to draw it how you think, how it's been designed to run. But help yourself and make it actual. The pickles, the diversions, the creative ways that teams and human behaviors happen, those things are useful. Make it actual. And it's going to give you the logic overall. Right? And then here on the right, for some of the Salesforcian fellas in the call, this is a story. It's the legend of Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce. Apparently was in a bar or in a restaurant, I'm not sure, and was having a conversation with a CEO of a retail luxury brand. Picked up a napkin and just draw on the napkin what he calls the customer 360. We use trillion multiple systems and applications and whatever it is. At the end of the day, is how organizations plot that together to look after the human consumer. And the story tells us that after that visual infused conversation, or hooked images into the concepts, they landed a very nice contract. Because visuals matter. So here I give you another example of that logic, where was a very brief attempt for me to convert the card game into a digital format. On the left, you have the legend that tells you purple is user action, green is a front page, and backend yellow, and things that we run on client is blue. So again, visual representation of a process, where the different sections sit, and it helps us to make decisions as well of which kind of service and where we are sitting with different things, depends on how we want it to behave. A techie example of an integration using the pattern of remote calling, and it's literally a screenshot of Salesforce developer documentation. So you can see, the sequence of events and what's happening in which, you remember we were talking about boundaries, is really helping us to digest that visual, right? Where sits what in a easier, simpler way. And this is an example when I was working for Hive, which is an organization from one of the biggest utility companies here in the UK. Joe, you know that. So what is this? This is the customer 360, perhaps, where we know here it's our invented customer, multiple different ways that we could acquire that customer and funneling that customer. It could entry through direct or partners or whatever it is. We have our orchestrator in the middle that goes and send the messages in the right place so that the customer get the product in their house, and we can connect it into our IoT platform, and ultimately we can bill it. And in the US, there are very fun rules about taxes, so we could be like handling those things nicely, and then we could support the customer in life throughout their use and so on. So relatively quick glance, I can surface the different applications that we use, explain the mapping of that customer. And I used to use this a lot with the team. So the team was fairly big, and every time we had somebody new joining, we will go through a fairly intense first 2 weeks called ramp up process, where you not only get to meet everybody in the 2 weeks, you also getting to know a lot of the intricacies of all those images that you see over here. Now, for me, as a Scrum Master for that team back then, I was taking this as an opportunity to say, okay, so this is our system landscape. This is how it looks. This is the big picture. Right? I used to use this as well when other teams that other people from other teams were joining as well. It gives us the ability to see at a glance what's going on, and I can then become the person that directs. If you need something in terms of taxes and fulfillment, then they could always come, and I will find a way to support their needs. All right, so coming to the end of this improv-ish session. For me, has come very apparent that visuals, there is just nothing that's capturing, that focuses, that calms, that builds connection in a way that an image, especially a live image, where you are enriching each other's tangibly, even on a screen. And connection and calmness, I really think, are things that our teams crave. I crave them. So are more having visuals infusing what we do in a way that we can digest better what's going on, that calms us and connects us. It's just more important than ever. So when you're in a situation like this, where you're trying to say something, information and ideas not really going through, then infuse it with visuals. Many times in meetings, I'll just pin often a Miro board, but whatever the organization the client is using, right? Something visual that we can draw and bring clarity together right now, right? That becomes our artifact. I can refer back, we can enhance. And at the end of the day, it's a practice. You are only gonna get better at it as you go along, as you do it, right? The more you do it, the easier second nature is gonna become. And try it. So let me know how your experiments go. What else I wanted to say? Yes, so last time around, we had Jirin on a session for virtual note-taking, which I thought was fascinating. When you have these meetings and at the same time somebody is doing all this drawing at the same time. Very cool. So she took us through like a lot of different components that you need to bear in mind to be able to do so. She's an agilist as well, so she showed us some of the things that she has been crafting with her team. So I will certainly encourage you to go to the link and watch it back. It's in our YouTube channel. Okay, well, hit me, guys. What's your thoughts and questions, and how do you use them? What have you tried recently? Let's build upon each other's ideas. Mike, please go for it.
So Ines, thanks for the presentation. It was great. I'm always curious when I watch presentations. Presentations tend to tell us one side of a story. So my mind usually goes to the other side and it says, well, when do these things go wrong? So when do visuals go wrong?
Good question. One of the things I try to surface is when we draw what we like to happen. And it's hard, obviously, we all with many biases. But one of the things that I find is that when we are crafting our ideal scenario, we're just setting ourselves for failure. But I'm sure the rest, you guys have lots of examples. I see some nodding faces. So tell us, when did it go wrong?
I've got an example. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. This is sort of like it went wrong, or maybe it didn't go wrong. I don't know. We had a whiteboarding session with a client recently, and this was a group that has, and that's kind of like you said, some problems kind of getting on the same page. Like the first slide where you had somebody had the triangle, somebody had the circle, somebody had the square. And we had this meeting, and I strongly believed before this meeting that we should kind of do a whiteboarding session where we're kind of mapping out the process. And the people who I was working with were saying, no, don't do a whiteboarding session. Like this group kind of disagrees with each other. And I said, well, that's like a feature, not a bug, right? They'll disagree with each other. But in this meeting, it was one of those meetings where it really went sideways. Like it really uncovered a lot more disagreements than sort of we could handle in an hour-long meeting. So it went sideways in terms of we probably uncovered more stuff than the group was capable of handling in that hour-long session. But it was good in the sense that prior to that, people sort of had intuition that there was disagreement, but it hadn't surfaced. So kind of it worked and it didn't work. It worked, it worked too well for our one meeting.
Fantastic.
So if you went back on time, Brian, now that you knew like the outcome of what will happen, how would you group that content? So
yeah, I think I would have done one of two things differently. We either would have taken the meeting, and rather than having like an hour, we would have needed like a half-day session. So really change expectations for what the meeting for what the meeting needed to be. So that would have either been one thing, or two, like narrow the scope much more. So still do the whiteboarding session, but narrow it to a much narrower scope in terms of what we're discussing about.
So that wasn't really intrinsically about the visuals. That would have been more about rather managing expectations, not trying to rush it, etc., etc. Yeah. So Ines, I was just struck, and this question came up because I saw the visual that you used of the pie chart. And in that pie chart, I think you were talking about where you had put a lot of your efforts for epics, for example. And if the discussion that comes from that is about, oh, we're spending too much time on something, or maybe a visualization of where we're spending a lot of our time, I think the one dimension that's possibly missing there, and maybe it's not needed, but this was my thought, the dimension that might be missing was value, right? So I thought to myself, hold on, if we have a visual that loses a dimension that's important to the conversation, then sometimes visuals can portray a truth that actually is missing a dimension. But then it also occurred to me that if you try and put in all dimensions, then visuals can become so complicated, they stop being the simple thing, the easily consumable thing. And so I guess there really has to be a compromise between the two.
Yeah, or maybe the narrative that accompanies the visuals. For me, that surfaced very clearly, not only where we spend our time, but where is our headspace, right? And that matters in everything that we do. We need to find joy, and we deserve headspace. And so perhaps the conversations of value were there. They may not be visual. Well, for the team involved, they are, right? They know what the projects are about and what we have ordered that we should be getting out the door. And that's a reality check.
Absolutely. I just think my point is we need to be careful because visuals are so powerful that if they portray things incorrectly, they can drive conversation in the wrong direction. So we always need to be very careful about how we portray them. I think that was more my point. But
absolutely. No, Helen, you were jumping in.
And a real quick second question for you, Wardley maps. Are you familiar with Wardley maps?
Google will tell us.
So it's a long conversation, but it's a visual mechanism for explaining. Well, I think you guys need to go and look it up, but I'll put it in the chat. And it really is fantastic, because its whole purpose and the whole reason that he came up with it was to have some type of visual representation that allowed everybody to communicate on something. And if we disagreed about something, we said, actually, no, the value shouldn't be here, or actually this is a consumable product rather than a service, that you can move things around, and it allows you to put everybody on the same page, rather than working conceptually where everybody might think that they're on the same page, but actually have slightly different sort of views and stuff. But I won't get into the intricacies of it. Go and look it up. It's interesting.
Love it. Thank you, Mike. And thank you for putting the info, Renee, as well in the chat. I may tap you for a session next time around.
So it's really nice. The book is for free, so just grab it.
So Helen, you were jumping in for a comment earlier. I don't want to miss the opportunity to bring you over.
No, it was I was just thinking of the invisible ink. So we've got the ink and then the invisible ink coming, I suppose, back to Mike, your point of, what isn't showing there. Like, that's just as valuable, a really interesting way of thinking. I like that a lot. That was it really. There was nothing more than that. Just liked what you said.
So which other examples, which other things have you guys been using on visuals recently in the work that we do? And I'm trying to find one to show you.
Well, I'll throw another question your way if you want, while you guys are looking. So storytelling. So storytelling is interesting to me, and it's certainly espoused by a lot of people, especially in the Agile community. Dave Snowden talks a lot about it. And I wonder whether storytelling, even though it's verbal, because it tells a linear story, whether it kind of transitions across the verbal visual boundary, and that's really where its power is. Don't know if anybody has a thought.
No, I agree with you there, because I think if we are telling that story, fair enough, we might not have a visual to see on screen, but people are creating visuals in their minds, which can be really powerful. I think when we're using visuals, we probably need to cater for the audience. So we might get, I don't know, someone from commercial or product showcasing all the different profits and everything else that we're making and how great a thing is. But we're a tech department. We're not going to be interested. We want to know where the tech's getting improved, where the investment for that's going in. So I guess visuals are really powerful, but it's a context and whether it caters for the audience that matters above everything else. And if you've got that storytelling behind it, you're kind of bringing them on the journey with you, and they're creating that story in their mind. So they've kind of got a visual already. And then when you show them the actual visual on the screen, it hits the point harder, and you get more of an impact, I think.
I 100% agree. And they're quite complementary, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, if you are rubbish at telling a story, don't even bother, because you'll just literally, the whole presentation will be a flop.
But have you found then that in using visuals, you have less need for intricate visuals, because the story augments those, or the visuals augment the story so much that they are just snapshot reminders of that help us to remember the story.
Yeah, so you wouldn't need a lot of details in your slides. People will, and even afterwards, after you've done the presentation, you've had the workshop, you kind of share those slides out to the group. When they see that slide, they will automatically refer back to what you were saying at that point. It just somehow connects and it just works really well.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I found my random drawing. I did show this last time around, where part of our work as well is becoming a mirror of the behavioral traits so that people become more aware, right? So we gave them HD glasses, and then they can make a decision if they're gonna wear them or not. One of the ways that I use this, and this is a very very scruffy drawings, just say. So conversation happened, and what I was doing, it was accounting for the volume. We were talking about volumes of how much people were talking. So the question is, how can I play this back to my team and ask them, are we giving the opportunity for all voices to be heard? At least the opportunity. That's a digest way they need to do, right? But we can infuse so much of what we do rather than by telling, but by showing. It gives another flavor, and it gives the opportunity for people to introspect. Any other visual thoughts? Maybe this spark that you're using that we can share with each other?
I really like that visual, and it's well done.
I didn't hear any gasps in the moment, but I could feel them. Another thing that you may have done as well with the teams is at the end of the week or whenever you finish your sprint is about how happy or how tough. You can have a very happy face or a very stressful one, angry in the other side, and just plotting everybody what they feel in that moment or how they think that sprint went brings another flavor, and it gives you the ability to ask questions of why is that, right? How can we infuse each other so that we are more this way than one outlier over here and the other one surfing over there?
I think that's a very, very tricky, like using emojis and stuff to gauge how people are feeling, because I have done that in the past, and I don't know whether I would fully 100% agree with the results that come out, because it depends on the day how you're feeling. You might think the sprint's okay, but if you've had a really rubbish morning, no matter what anyone says, is going to be a downward space. So what we've done a lot, or I've done, is we'll see how we kind of do a health check, but how we do it is a one-to-one. So our role is mainly about people. We need to invest in people. We are supporting people. So you take that time out to kind of see what they're doing. Are they happy? Are they not? And then on the back of that, you can plot your graph. So they'll give you a score, say, for example, but whilst you're having those conversations, you're also asking them, it's not about the business. You as an individual, how are you feeling? What is it that you want from the job? Are you interested in what you're doing? Do you want to kind of dabble your hands in something else, kind of thing? And we have those conversations. And when another piece comes up where you think, actually, this person's interested, and automatically their name comes to your mind, and you say, well, actually, this is coming up. Are you interested? Guarantee next time when you ask them the same question, how you're feeling, it'll be much higher, because they've seen that you've actually not taken them as a squad member, you've taken them on board as an individual, and it matters. And I think businesses trying to do these happiness scores and see how well the squad is at squad level, but we need to remember everyone's an individual, we're not numbers. And until that changes in organizations, those charts and happiness scores are just tick box exercise. But that's just my opinion, obviously. But
yeah, I think two things comes to mind from that. One is that we as a species, we're trying to put modules, we're trying to organize, we can create boundaries. All these are conceptual inventions, they don't exist. We're trying to do this modularity with the least modular thing of all, humans, right? Yeah. And then the other thing, which is we come up with all these things, we try them out, but they are tools, right? The tools are there to support, and tools can be evolved. You're not going to find the same with an application. It's not going to be your external God complex where you think that this application or this individual or this tool is going to come and save you. That's kind of a flaw, I think. in perception, but how can we use the tools to support where we're going, right? And so, having ideas and getting inspired by what others do, I find that useful, so I can infuse what I'm already doing with, what others are also doing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. The way it works with my squad, so I am a Scrum Master, and we always say one Scrum Master to one squad. I was over 3 at one point, and it was a nightmare. But because I've always been the sort of person, lead by example, and try and take everything on, I had to hold my hands up to my squad, one of them, and say, look, I've got way too much on. This is what we need to do. Are you comfortable me coaching you to become the self-sufficient squad that you want to be? And then I started delegating work to them, and they were quite happy doing that. And now I'm in such, touch wood, I'm in a good position where they just crack on. They're such an amazing squad, they just crack on. But I only got there because I allowed myself to take a step back. Because I remember before I used to do everything because I felt it was my job. But that's not the case. And I think with that, like the retros and everything else, visuals and bringing your own personality, they're all doing it themselves. And that's changed the dynamics massively. So now people are opening, saying, actually, we need to repair this. How can we create, whether it's a spreadsheet or a visual that can forecast what a life cycle's like? I mean, you don't get devs and QA saying stuff like that. That's normally what Scrum Masters always pushing. But because they've seen the power of how that's worked in the past, they want to give it a go. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier. You want to share all your ideas and get other people's ideas and see how you can infuse it and spread those so people are bought in. And it goes back to what Mike was saying, is that storytelling element. Once you can do that quite well, people buy into you and they want to be able to use those visuals. And it is powerful.
Rupi, quick question for you.
Yeah.
It almost sounds as though you feel guilty that you had to let your squad be more autonomous. So my question is that not the end goal?
It is the end goal, yes. My end goal is not to have a job there, so they don't need me at all. But I guess the reason why I might have felt a bit guilty is a very new team. They're very new. We've kind of onboarded a lot of squads at the same time. Not all of them know what the technology is. So not only we've onboarded loads of squads, but we've changed the technology stack altogether. So a lot of changes, and I just felt I was leaving them in the lurch a bit, where I should have been their sport blanket. But I think it works quite well. And there's only so much you can do. And I'm glad I was put in that situation, because it's allowed me to help them to grow, as well as showing me that actually I need to step back more and let the squads take that ownership. Nothing's going to go wrong. If they need me, they'll reach out to me. I just need to let them put their stamp on it, which has been a learning curve for me.
And if you don't mind me asking, and if you feel comfortable saying, are there any things that did go horribly wrong?
For that particular squad, no. They all stepped up. It was great. But because I was focused on that squad so much, one of the other squads I had, maybe I didn't see some of the signs that I could have picked up had I been with them 100%. And we've had to make a few changes in resources from that point of view, like different personalities and stuff. But because I was only in certain conversation, not all of them, I missed some. So it goes back to, it should be a one-to-one relationship with squads, because that way you can cater for them 100% and you can be successful. Whereas if you're spread thin, you're trying to cover everything, but you can't do 100% on everything.
Thank you for sharing.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate your time and your questions and openness on these topics. Sharing, it's really interesting to see and hear. Are there any other burning questions before we start to wrap up this evening? I know that we are, or this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are. My bad tonight. No? Okay. Well, thank you, Ines, for jumping in at the, like, literally the last minute. Yeah. Wonderful to hear. I love the visual. Thank you, Renee. And yeah, we always love to hear your feedback. We are, going with our agile mindset, and we love to improve, continuous improvement. Hear stuff that maybe if you have a burning subject, we'll try and source the people out there. And if you've got a topic yourself that you think you might want to talk about and share, like, reach out to us. We're like I say, try to welcome everybody and understand different points of view and share knowledge and all of those sorts of things. So feedback, I think there is a link. Yes, Ines has just popped the link in the channel, so if it takes around about 3 or 4 minutes if you filled it out before, we do listen. I hope that you can see that we listen to that and try and bring people that are relevant, and pretty much takes us to the end of our session. So thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your time in the day, and we shall speak to you and see you next time in a few months. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.